we are very happy to have Dr. B.S. Harishankar with us today. He has recently written a book. The book was released recently, Beyond Rampage. The book covers a different angle which was hitherto unknown to us. Most of us were not aware about this. This book was released in July in Thiruvananthapuram and in August in Delhi. And we requested Dr. Harishankar to come and address us and to provide us insights about what happened during Mopla riots. Mopla riots, unfortunately, is a part of Indian history and a part of Khilafat movement. We all know what was Khilafat movement in after the First World War. There was a agitation among Muslims. They wanted reimposition of Ottoman Caliphate, and Indian Muslims got agitated, and they also joined hands. And Ali brothers and Maulana Azad, they led it, and they appealed to all Muslims to agitate and demand from Muslims that the Caliphate should be reinstated. This movement was termed as Khilafat movement. Now, Gandhiji had returned from South Africa, and he had some very unfortunate experiences of dealing with Muslims over there. And he felt that in India, to launch a wider freedom struggle or a movement or an agitation against British, he needed support of Muslims. Now, while observing this Khilafat movement and seeing the anger among Indian Muslims, Gandhiji felt that if he support it, then somehow Indian Muslims will also join his call for freedom from British colonialism. And out of this, I would say, desperation to get the support of Muslims, Gandhiji fully supported Khilafat movement. And not only he supported, he put entire Congress machinery, Congress resources, Congress funds, Congress workers behind Khilafat movement. Now, that much is known and that much has been taught to us in history books. Unfortunately, the Khilafat movement remained a pan-Islamist movement. There was a very clear-cut agenda behind it. And a lot of rumors and a lot of misinformation spread during that period. And one particular misinformation or rumor which was spread was about attack by the ruler of Afghanistan and capturing Delhi and establishing an Islamic rule over India. And the Muslims in Malabar region who were termed as Moplas, or in English some writers write it as Mapilas, they were appealed, and there were some. It was a series of incidents which had been going on. There were some Arab preachers from Arab, and they were instigating the Muslims to revolt and convert this nation into an Islamic nation. So, getting inspired by the rumors of Afghanistan capturing New Delhi, the Moplas got agitated and they started attacking the Hindus in the Malabar region. Now, the history which we have been taught is that it was a freedom struggle. Again, the struggle was against British, and in the process, some Hindu landlords who were hand in glove with British, they were also attacked, and ultimately it was a minor incident, but the larger incident of the larger objective of this riot was revolt against the British. But now we have realized and we have read the facts, we have come to the conclusion after having gone through all the facts that it wasn't so. It was purely a genocide. It was purely a communal riot with intention to establish an Islamic rule in the Malabar region. And the leftist historian, the communist governments in Kerala, hand in glove with the Congress government in the center, they somehow brushed aside and all these facts, what we call unpleasant facts about the riots, about the Hindu genocide, about the butchery, about the rape, torture of women, children. If you read about it, we are 100 years later, we are in the again getting reminded about the Taliban in Afghanistan. But if you read about the history of what actually happened during Mopla riots in 1921, everything else pales in comparison in brutality, in inhumanness. We are very lucky to have Dr. Hari Shankar ji with us. I'll give a brief introduction about Dr. Hari Shankar, our speaker today, and he will give his presentation today. He will give insights about what he has studied and what he has written in his book, Beyond Rampage. B.S. Hari Shankar did his PhD from Pune University in 1999, and thereafter he did 2 postdoctoral studies. The first was awarded by the Indian Council of Historical Research, ICHR, in 2002 and completed at Kerala University. Thereafter, in 2015, he was awarded Kalicharan Puri Fellowship by India Policy Foundation for his work in archaeology. He has worked in various organizations. He has handled different roles. He has written several books. He has 8 works in archaeology and history to his credit, 1 including in Malayalam also. His works include Art and Archaeology, that was in 2003, An Introduction to Archaeology and Heritage Management, 2013, Imprints of Past, An Archaeological Outline of Northeast India, 2015, and Cultural Terrorism, Conflicts, Debates on Cultural Past, 2020, and many more. He has also been an assistant editor of Puratattva, a journal of Indian archaeology, that was in early 90s. He has also published research papers in various journals, including in the British Archaeological Reports at Oxford. He has presented numerous papers in various national and international conferences, seminars, workshops on history and archaeology. He has also chaired thematic sessions in various national conferences. He writes regularly on history, archaeology, culture related issues. Currently, Dr. Hari Shankar is a member of academic committee at Indian Institute of Advanced Study at Shimla, and is also a member of Fellowship Grants Committee, Indian and Foreign Scholars at IIS. He has undertaken a study of archaeology of Northeast India for Vivekananda Kendra. He published the work on archaeology of Northeast India titled Imprints of the Past. He has also exposed Pattanam and Kizadi archaeological projects in Kerala and Tamil Nadu, which were sponsored by foreign universities and the Dravidian hardliners, radicals, along with leftist historians. I request Dr. Hari Shankar to guide us, to provide us more insights about Mopla riots and some hidden facts which were not known to us, and how this whole movement, all the riots, all the Khilafat movement, it definitely wasn't about peasantry or farmers. It was much more than that. And as we have mentioned in the topic today, whether it was agrarian uprising or it was a forest banditry. Over to you, Dr. Hari Shankar.
I thank Dr. Kuldeep Ratnu, Director Indian Policy Foundation, for giving me an opportunity to talk on this subject on agrarian uprising, questioning the credentials of the Mopla rebellion. 1 year back, Muhammad Ayub, Professor Emeritus of Michigan University, who has specialized in international relations, wrote an article in the Hindu newspaper. It was titled Mapla Uprising. Professor Ayub emphasized that the anti-British sentiment among Maplas in Malabar, it was fueled by the economic misery due to newly introduced tenancy laws that tremendously favored the Hindu landlords and made the Moplas landless. The landlords were upper caste Hindus, while most of the tenants, in fact the entire tenants, were Mopla Muslims. In fact, Muhammad Ayub, he was just echoing The left theories by Professors K.N. Panikkar, Professor Bipan Chandra, Kathleen Gao, D.N. Dhanagare, Ravindra Gopinath, and others who narrated the ghastly Hindu carnage in Malabar as merely a peasant uprising against Hindu feudalism and British colonialism. Left historians constantly argue that the 1921 Mopra carnage or rampage was a peasant rebellion having both anti-feudal and anti-imperialistic content. The left equations in Malabar present only Hindu landlords who supported the colonial state and the anti-colonial, anti-feudal Mopra peasants who were ruthlessly exploited. They hide the facts that the Mopra landlords, they hide the facts on Mopra landlords and the Hindu peasants. It was a left equation that was very shrewdly crafted to fit into a new theory and carve out new political and economic permutations and combinations. Left historians constantly argue the 1921 Hindu rampage, Mopra carnage, the Mopra rampage was a peasant rebellion having both anti-feudal and anti-imperialistic content. The left equations in Malabar present only Hindu landlords who supported the colonial state. The left equation in Malabar present only Hindu landlords who supported the colonial state and the anti-colonial and anti-feudal Mopra tenants who were constantly and ruthlessly exploited. They hide the facts on Mopra landlords who existed in Malabar. They present the picture of Malabar, the socio-economic structure of Malabar, without any presence of Mopra landlords. It was a left equation that was very shrewdly crafted to fit into a new theory and carve out new political and economic permutations and combinations. I should emphasize here that Professor Konradud, who himself is a distinguished Marxist scholar, raised a serious question in his work. If Hindu tenants and laborers in Malabar admittedly suffered quite as much, if not more, from the socio-economic system in Malabar, why were outbreaks confined exclusively to the Muslim community? Wood's observation, it prompts us to raise another serious question in this context. Why there did not occur a single uprising or even slightest protest by poor and exploited Mopras against wealthy landlords, Mopra landlords? Why there did not occur a single uprising by exploited Mopra tenants against wealthy and affluent Mopra landlords in Malabar? We have a plethora. In fact, we have a plethora of Mopra landlords such as Koranganatha Unniyan, Vadakate Mugari, Athan Moin Kurikal, Iripidathil Rayan, Churiyot Tasil, Katle Mopras, Vallapilangat Hassan Kuti, Kunyali, and Mohammad Kuti. These are only few among them. The left historians have conveniently suppressed the fact even the peasants of such a wealthy Mopra class in Malabar. Since the early 70s, this was the picture that was given to us. Not only textbooks, even in books, hundreds of books and papers presented and narrated by left scholars. The Mopra rebellion, the Mopra uprising, the bloody uprising, it was against the Hindu landlords and colonial state. In this context, when the Mopras of Malabar are presented as poor peasants and deprived tenants, we have to look into the past. Covering an area of nearly 15,009 square kilometers, the former Malabar district, which was part of the exclusive British Madras Presidency, it was a very thickly forested zone on the eastern side. On the eastern section of Malabar, we can find the Western Ghats with thickly forested area and Arabian Sea on the west. And this remained a premier area, a premier zone for spice trade with West Asia for more than 6 centuries. Studies on maritime trade and inland trade of extremely rich Mopra merchants who were also wealthy landowners in Malabar change our hitherto views on the impoverished, exploited and poor Mopra community of Malabar, propagated by left historians who totally kept aside the environmental setting and climate of Malabar in historical context. In fact, there were 2 factors which helped the maritime trade of Malabar. One, it was the climate. The southwest monsoons in Malabar helped the incoming vessels on the Malabar coast from West Asia and other parts of the globe. It remained here for nearly 3 to 4 months. These vessels which entered the Malabar zone, the Arabian Sea. The southwest monsoons helped it. By November, December, the southeast monsoons helped these vessels go back to their respective homelands. And then there were numerous rivers, inland river systems, inland waterways, which were finely linked, connected with the coastal areas. So it was very easy to collect spices from various inland routes and bring them to the coastal zone and hand over them to the traders. It was this environmental setting that greatly helped the trade of Malabar. And thus this trade network for nearly 6 to 7 centuries helped the emergence of a ICD. And what is the ICD? It is the Islamic commercial diaspora in Malabar. The cross-cultural interactions of Arab merchants, their Muslim trading partners, and Islamic clergy with a mission for propagating Islam. These all factors gave it a vast framework. The significance of Malabar's pepper trade in Arabian Sea, the crucial space it carved out, occupied the global trade, and the pivotal role Malabari Muslim merchants played are all crucial in understanding the socio-economic history of Malabar in the present context. From the 14th century, we can find how Malabar developed links with West Asia, especially with the port of Jeddah. And Jeddah is situated as the gateway to Mecca on the eastern shore of the Red Sea. It was connected with Malabar in the context of spice trade. So they developed a spice route in the history of ancient trade. In fact, when we look into the economy of the Arabian region, we can find after oil, the first factor, this pilgrimage, it was this pilgrimage that sustained Saudi Arabia's economy from first millennium AD. It was oil and pilgrimage, these 2 factors, which crucially sustained Arabia for more than 1,000 years. When we look at Malabar, we can find there were 40 Muslim mercantile houses and landlords between 1600 to 1900 AD. And unscrupulously, the left historians are totally silent on the association of Jeddah and Ottoman Empire with Malabar and the strong bondage of Mamram Tangals, the Sunni clergy with Istanbul and West Asia through the Hadrami tradition, which began nearly 2 centuries before the Khilafat movement in India, in fact in Malabar. So with the strong bondage, with the strong mercantile links and trade routes that developed between Malabar and West Asia, we can find from the 15th century, Ponnani, the region called Ponnani in South Malabar, it developed strong bonds with West Asia, and it became the spiritual locus of Malabar ulema and Orthodox Sunni tradition. They issued various fatwas. The beginning of fatwas begins from Ponnani in Malabar against the Portuguese, even asking support from Ottoman Turkey to fight against Christianity and uproot Christianity from the Malabar region. These fatwas, which were first issued during the Portugal period, was later reused against the Hindu society from the 1860s. These fatwas were kept away after the Portugal period, but it was again taken out and reused against the Hindu society from 1860s. It culminated in the 1921 carnage, the Malabar carnage. I told you earlier that there were 40 business houses in Malabar, Mopra business houses. The Ali Rajas of Arakkal in North Malabar were both Islamic rulers and Covenant mercantile traders, maritime traders. The Arakkal route, the Arakkal house enjoyed leadership of the Mapras in Malabar, and encouraged the spread of Islam. Khan Bahadur Sultan Abdul Rahman Ali Raja from this house, from the Arakkal house, was an elected member from Chirakkal Taluk in Madras Legislative Assembly in 1940. This gentleman, Khan Bahadur Sultan Abdul Rahman Ali Raja, became the vice president of the Madras State Muslim League. Then we can find the Siddhi states, where a major Mapra mercantile group at Koiland in Kozhikode, who owned ships and traded with Red Sea. The Saints were also major religious leaders of the Mapras. Then there were the Keis and Koyas, two dominant mercantile houses in coastal towns, particularly in Talasheri and Kozhikode. The Baramis and Temims were the Hadrami groups who were migrants from Hadramaut to Malabar. More particularly, they were concentrated in Kozhikode or Calicut. The Kei Mapra Muslims, who were big tycoons, they also owned properties in Mumbai, Kozhikode, Trivandrum and Mangalore. Another wealthy Mapra lineage in Malabar are the Kondoti Tangals. The propounder of Kondoti Tangals or Shah Tangals, they belong to the Shia tradition, and they were much disliked. In fact, they were disliked and hated by the Sunni, Orthodox Sunni Mopras in Malabar. Similarly, the Bafiks, they also belong to Hadrami Sayyids, who migrated to Malabar from Yemen. And among them, the Sayyid Abdul Rahman Baba was a towering personality in commerce and politics of modern Kerala. The Nahas are among the oldest Mopra families in Malabar and are traditionally big landowners. The Kalladi family in Manarkar, in the erstwhile Valvanadi Taluk, they were traditionally large timber merchants. Most of these families, they were also big timber merchants in Malabar. And timber played a pivotal role in the economy of Malabar, since the timber from Malabar, especially from the Nilambur area, was much sought after in West Asia and Europe. It was internationally renowned timber. In fact, the Kutchi Memuns from Kutch region, they also migrated from the Kutch Gujarat to Malabar region, and they settled near on the border of Kochi and Malabar for a long time, since 1800. And now we have got an idea of the Malabar Mopra business houses and landowners, and how these facts have been constantly suppressed and hidden by left and so-called secular historians. And the Mopras were presented before us as deprived, suppressed, poor, and ruthlessly exploited tenants in Malabar since at least 1,000 years. Now we are going to the second stage. The Mapra peasant and the Hindu landlord. This has been the picture, the portrait that has been given to us by the left historians. In fact, Marxist historians from JNU, like Professor K.N. Panikkar, they have presented these big business houses, nearly 40 big business houses, who had maritime trade with West Asia and Europe, as petty traders. See the word they have used. They have narrated them as petty traders. And I shall give the full sentence how K.N. Panikkar has used in his work Against the Lord and the State, which was published with the ICHR funding. The overwhelming majority of Mapras were cultivating tenants, landless laborers, petty traders, and fishermen. I am quoting his sentence. This is how they have presented the Mopras in Malabar. In fact, Malabar was never constantly a land with extensive paddy cultivation. Large quantity of grain, especially pulses and paddy, they were imported into Malabar from Kochi, Canara, Konkan Coast, then the early Madras Presidency and Bengal. What was cultivated in Malabar, that we should know. In South Malabar, we get a topography that's different. The South Malabar physiography is studded with hills and hillocks and dense forests. And so that what was constantly cultivated in South Malabar, it was ginger, exclusively ginger, and some paddy cultivations here and there. And one area was the exception, I should say, that was the Palakkad region. The Palakkad region was the only area where paddy was extensively cultivated, and this Palakkad region was free from any riots. Palakkad region was free from any riots. Malabar also underwent famines, severe famines, in 1865, 1866, 1876, 1877, 1878, and 1890, which severely ruined its cultivation, a major factor which has been kept aside or rather cornered by the historians. In fact, the socio-economic equilibrium of Malabar, it began to change after the invasion by Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan from Mysore. After the Mysorean interludes, which resulted in massacres, large-scale destruction of temples and conversions, socio-economic equilibrium of Malabar got tilted. Until before the invasion of the Mysorean sultans, Malabar had a harmonious social system where the Moplas went in harmony with the Hindu society. It was after the interlude of the Mysorean sultans, things began to change. There were large-scale destruction of temples, conversions and massacres. And we can see the large-scale migration of Hindus from Malabar region to Kochi and Travancore. These settlements, which witnessed large-scale migration of Hindus from Malabar, these are the Kozhikode, Wayanad, Kannur, exclusively in North Malabar, and Malappuram, Palakkad, and Thrissur, which were confined to South Malabar. And these data we have taken from the census reports by the Government of India. Once the Hindus migrated, there was large-scale migration of Hindus into Kochi and Travancore. The Mopla Kanamdars took possession of the land owned by the Hindus. And after this Hindus migrated to Kochi and Travancore, Tipu's army, Tipu Sultan's army, settled land revenue purposes with the Mopla Kanamdars. And what is Kanamdar? Kana means in giving the land in a lease or lease. And these were the managers. And they took possession of the land in Malabar that belonged to Hindus. The Mopla Kanamdars appropriated land and revenue when Malabar was under Tipu. And let me quote Kondra Dutt, the distinguished Marxist scholar again. According to Kondra Dutt, at least in a very well documented case, the interest of the Muslim Kanamdar, Mopla Kanamdar, was linked with the fortunes of Tipu Sultan. It was not linked with the Mopla tenants, but it was linked with the fortunes of Tipu. So once the British entered into an encounter with Tipu Sultan, and that led to the downfall of Tipu with the Treaty of Srirangapattanam, Malabar came under the rule of the East India Company. And once Tipu's downfall happened and Malabar was annexed by the British, the migrant Hindus returned and reclaimed their land, which was illegally possessed by Mopla Kanamdars. Let me quote the exclusive, the distinguished scholar Michael Mann again. Mann argues that the gap means the gap between peasants and landowners, was filled by a calculable number of Moplas who not only became landowners and improved their economic situation and social status, but later resulted in fierce conflicts with Hindus after they returned to Malabar. And once the British took charge of Malabar, they perceived one thing. They cannot go for an encounter with the Moplas immediately after taking control of Malabar. So in order to appease the Moplas, the British appointed Moplas in influential posts. Thus, Chemben Pokar assumed the power of revenue officer in the Shernad area. Subsequently, he became much more powerful than the Tipu's era. And utilizing his official position, he acquired a good deal of land. And Hindus of this Shernad region complained on Pokar's oppressive behavior, like plundering and looting of their property. This has not been referred anywhere in the left studies and narratives on the Mopla rebellion. On 12th October 1849, H.V. Connolly, or the Henry Valentine Connolly, who was the Malabar magistrate at that time. He was Malabar magistrate in 1849 and later he became the collector of Malabar district. So Connolly complained, observed that there were large number of Hindu tenants in Eranad Valluvanad region in South Malabar and remarked that the Mapla tenants were on terms of amity with their Mapla landlords. This was Connolly's observation. The Mopla tenants were on terms of amity with their Mopla landlords and they would have resorted to protest if they had any grievance. No, they were not having any grievance with the Mopla landlords. The Mopla tenants were having no grievance with the Mopla landlords. But the violence was by Mopla tenants against the Hindu landlords. After all, let me say frankly, this Zamindari system and landlordism, it has no religion. I don't think it has a religion. It has no color. Exploitation is exploitation. But this was Connolly's observation, that the violence was by Mopla tenants against the Hindu landlords. No protest by Mopla tenants against Muslim landlords. Similarly, there were no protests by Hindu tenants against the Hindu landlords. This was the situation in 1850s as observed by Connolly. In fact, the British manipulated the pre-colonial structures in India by infusing new blood for old in the proprietary body of permanent settlement in the east. Then there's a Rotiwari settlement in the south and some permutations in other parts of the country. They completely ruined the system after taking charge of India and especially in Malabar. In fact, the colonial rule was interested in creating and recognizing a powerful class who owned the land, and not only the land, they had absolute control over the land to act as their agents in the region. In fact, Professor Dharmakumar Delhi he has observed, by recognizing the pretension of Jainis in Malabar, the Mulavargadars in Kanara and Mirasdars in Tamil area, British put the power of law behind private ownership for the first time in the history of India. In fact, it was the British colonial rule which put the power of land, power of law behind private ownership for the first time in the history of India. Before colonial rule, there was nothing like private property or Zamindari system. It was the British who spoiled it. But here also a serious question has to be raised. The new Janvi system which the British introduced in India, it was not confined to Malabar area. It was confined to Kannada and Tamil regions in South India. Then in other parts of India such as Bengal. But the riots took place only in Malabar. Let me put before you an example in Malabar in 1884, which was observed that Osankutti Mamu, a Mopla tenant, he was threatened with eviction in March 1884 by both his Hindu and Mopla landlords. He was threatened, literally threatened with eviction. But Osankutti Mamu, the tenant, planned an outbreak only against his Hindu landlord. And his Mopla landlord was simply left untouched. How this happened? Let me quote the distinguished historian Thomas Madden here again. So Thomas Madden has discussed how Marxists have interpreted medieval European crusades in a particular way. They have narrated the crusades as an outcome of idealism. It has nothing to do with religion. That is what the Marxist scholars say. Madden says that crusades took place in Europe because of population growth, scarcity in resources, and surplus labor, seeking new territories abroad. In other words, crusades were interpreted by Marxists as a search for job by unemployed youth from feudal Europe. This was the portrait given by Marxist scholars on crusades in Europe, as told to us by the distinguished historian Thomas Madden. We have to look into another factor, a third stage in the development of the Malabar Rebellion. It was the many causes for the pre-1921 riots. The Mopla uprising was not the 1921 riot. In fact, before 1921, I should say frankly here that 50 riots took place in Malabar against the Hindu population, in which Hindus lost both life and property. From 1850s, late 1850s till 1920s, 50 riots took place in Malabar. It was not agrarian grievances, but denial of land. This was the cause. These riots took place, 50 riots took place, not because of agrarian grievances, but let me quote it again, denial of land for construction of mosques adjacent to temples that led to these attacks. In all these cases, we can see, when we verify the records, we can find it was denial of land for construction of mosques that led to attacks in all these cases. And they wanted to construct the mosques adjacent to temples, which was denied by the Hindu population, and this led to attacks. The ghastly murders as that of Puratur warrior at Eranad in 1851, slaughter of 18 members of the Karatil family in 1852 at Mattanur. In 1873 again, the attack on Karambara Nair in Valuvanadu Taluk. Then finally in 1852, the attack on Kudiyadatha Anandan. These are all some instances in these 50 riots where the one and only cause was denial of land for construction of mosques. We can't find agrarian grievances here. Here I shall quote one instance, how the question of constructing mosques near Hindu temples came up as a serious issue. The Trikkalayur, which was the center of the largest Mopla outbreaks in December 1884. It was constructed near the Trikkalayur Shiva temple, the mosque. And this led to the grand outbreaks at Trikkalayur. In 1901, when the governor of Madras Presidency, he toured Malabar, he was presented a petition by Hidayatul Muslimin Sabha, the premier Muslim organization, Hidayatul Muslimin Sabha, in which the main issues faced by Moplas in Malabar was underlined and given to the governor. This was the case. It was in persuading the landlords to sell land for construction of mosques. This was pointed out as the primary reason, as the primary grievance of the Moplas in Malabar. In 1901, when a representation was given to the governor of Madras Presidency, the same year, the Moplas of Kaipaganjeri Amsham brought to the notice of the collector of Malabar that a similar issue of denial of land for construction of mosques was there with the Islam Sabha at Ponnani in South Malabar. See, two representations given to two major organizations, Muslim organizations, to the collector of Malabar and also the governor of Madras Presidency. The major issue was highlighted by the Moplas was that they were denied land for the construction of mosques. There were no agrarian grievances. There were no issues of tenancy or tenants. Early in 12th August 1851, I should say, before 1901, on 12th August 1851, a memorandum signed by 29 Hindus, premier Hindus, prominent Hindus, titled, let me read the heading, title of the petition. The petition of the undersigned Hindu inhabitants of Eranad, Sheranad and Valvanad taluks was submitted to the Malabar magistrate H.V. Connolly. This memorandum, it highlighted, it requested for granting the fundamental right of Hindus to live in these taluks peacefully, cultivate their land and maintain and sustain their families. This was the memorandum given by the Hindus to H.V. Connolly on 12th August 1851. They requested only one thing: the fundamental right of the Hindus to live in these taluks peacefully, cultivate their land and maintain their families. The memorandum accused the affluent, not the ordinary Moplas, but the affluent and the wealthy Mopla class and the clergy for inciting frequent outrages against the Hindus in Malabar. This is a very clear case, a very precise case, in which the Hindus submitted a memorandum, which can be seen as a major historical document. There were no outrages by Hindus against the Moplas. You can't find out a single instance. But first the memorandum was submitted. In fact, H.M. Winterbotham, who was a member of the Madras Board of Revenue, astonishingly, he observed in 1896 that I am surprised, I am puzzled that for the last 25 years, outbreaks in Malabar occur within 15 miles of the Pandalur hill. And I cannot profess to solve it. Why these frequent outbreaks occur in the forested areas of Malabar, especially in the Pandalur hills, in and around the 15 kilometers range, 15 miles range of Pandalur hills. The outbreaks never occur in paddy fields or areas of cultivation. But all the frequent outbreaks occur within 15 miles of Pandalur hills. Why? And this record, it is recorded in Madras Judicial Proceedings, number 1567, September 30, 1896. And Pandalur Hills, I should quote C.A. Innes, who wrote the Malabar Gazette, that it was one of the most densely forested areas in Eranad taluk of Malabar. Now we should move. Now we have, since we have discussed that Winterbotham's observations, that why frequent outbreaks occur in Malabar, not in villages, not in paddy fields, not in areas of cultivation, but only in densely forested areas and forest regions. We should know why it happens only there. Here we see the relevance of the powerful, the affluent Mopla timber lobby, their presence in Malabar. In fact, the control of Malabar came under British in 1792 in accordance with the Treaty of Srirangapattanam. Colonial authorities noticed the valuable timber wealth of Malabar forest and identified the Nilambur timber teak as the best substitute for oak to build ships for British Navy, since due to heavy utilization, it was completely exhausted in England. In South India, the finest quality of teak came from Malabar, and it was sent to Mumbai dockyard for shipbuilding from the last decades of the second half of the 18th century. Teak wood from Nilambur forest was used in the construction of Buckingham Palace, then the Kaaba of Mecca, the interior of a Rolls-Royce car, and RMS Titanic. This was the utility of Nilambur teak, the timber from Malabar. In fact, not only C.A. Innes, but also William Logan and Malabar Deputy Collector C. Gopalan Nair, they have all referred and quoted extensively in their works the prime importance of timber in Malabar, not only in its internal trade, internal commerce, but also in its international trade with global markets in West Asia and Europe, and the major role played by the Mopla timber houses in such transactions, in all these timber transactions. The Mopla riots before 1921 and in 1921 were concentrated in Eranad and Valluvanad taluks of South Malabar. In fact, the teak which we have referred earlier, the Nilambur teak, which was globally preferred, was located in this region of South Malabar. The forests of South Malabar can be divided into two ranges, the Nilambur and the Palakkad forest ranges. The Nilambur division comprised Nilambur and Amarambalam ranges, covering an area of 81,000 acres. The Palakkad division has two ranges, Palakkad and Mannarkad, covering an area of more than 1,12,140 acres. This was the vast area covered by these teak zones, timber zones. And Beypore in Malabar was the most famous harbour and wharf location in Kozhikode due to superior quality timber from hinterlands, which was flowed to the Beypore area through the rivers. Rivers were used for cutting the trees and flowing them into the coastal regions. There were very powerful Mopla timber merchants at major timber zones, timber hubs, we should say, at Kallai, Ferrokh, Beypore, Chalyam, Kadalundi, Mambat, Nilambur, Etakara, Edavanna, and Aryakod, all in Malabar, which are major timber outlets in southern India, in peninsular India. In Malabar, the Kallai timber belt, it spreads over an area of around 35 kilometers on both sides of the Kallai river, and it was known as the hub of timber market in South Asia. And it occupied the second position in global timber trade, and it controlled and regulated timber prices for several decades. This was the position enjoyed by teak in Malabar, and how it controlled and regulated timber prices in the global market. Just see how it controlled the economy of Malabar and what it has to do with agriculture. By the 18th century, by the early 18th century, the Attapadi forest region in Malabar became the property of the Samudris, the Samarins of Kozhikode, the rulers of Kozhikode. The Samudris, or the Samarins, entrusted the administration of this area to three chieftains. The Mannarkad Mupil Nair, Palat Krishna Menon, and Eralpad Raja. See, he entrusted the control of these forest zones, administration of the areas, to three chieftains. Even these three chieftains, they could not control, they could not privately own this forest area. These forest areas of Malabar were the property of the temples of Malabar. So these chieftains and Samarins, they were only managers, nothing more and nothing less. These forest zones were the property of the, in fact, the deities of the temples, When East India Company annexed Malabar, they set up a committee in 1805 with Major William Atkins and Alexander Macon for a detailed survey of the timber resources. Joseph Watson, appointed as conservator of forests, unified the provinces of Malabar and Canara in the forest department to facilitate centralized timber trade. And timber trade virtually came into the hands of British East India Company. And when timber trade was monopolized by the British, it was the Moplas who lost their hegemony in timber trade, which they used for centuries. In fact, the monopoly of Mopla merchants on timber trade diminished to such an extent that in a petition filed in 1808 at the Zilla Court in Talisheri by Chevakaran Musa, principal Mopla business tycoon of Kannur, he claimed that the new regulations, the forest regulations by the colonial British, they have deprived Mopla merchants of their ancient and customary rights to forests. We should understand one thing here, that it was not the British East India Company who alone led to the deprivation of timber trade of the Moplas, which they enjoyed for several centuries. It was the invasion of the Tipus and Hyder Ali, when the Mysore invasion took place in Malabar, the Moplas of Malabar strongly and collectively supported the Mysorean sultans, and this led to bitter hostility between the Hindu population and the Moplas in Malabar. And once the British took over Malabar, and which led to the decline of the Mysorean sultans, there was strong resentment and hostility. There was strong resentment and hostility, and also suspicion by the Hindus regarding the Moplas in Malabar. They never allowed the Moplas to take control of the timber trade once again. The timber trade was, in fact, completely refused to be handed over to the Moplas. In fact, the Hindu landlords, the vassals of the Zamorin, they handed over the timber trade, which was owned by and controlled by the Moplas, the British East India Company, because they viewed them with hostility. And as a first part, it was the collector of Malabar, Henry Valentine Connolly, who initiated the 1848 teak plantations in Malabar. And he served as a pioneering example of systematic forest management. After entering into a transactions and agreement with the Zamorin's vassals in Malabar, he took over large areas in forest region and started planting teak in Malabar. In many regions, he planted teak, especially in the Nilambur Valley. Although later, in fact, very sadly, H.V. Connolly was assassinated. And historians point out that it was the exile of Mamram Tangal, the Sunni priest from Ponnani to West Asia, that led to Connolly's murder in 1855. The real fact is something different. Connolly became the middleman to have a transaction between East India Company and Hindu landlords in Malabar to initiate teak plantations in the region, in which the Moplas lost their hegemony. And in 1855, nearly 5 criminals from the Kozhikode jail, they came out of the jail, murdered Connolly, and went back to the jail. So the real culprits could not be identified. Even in fact, the Hindu on September 11, 2018, admit that it has been 163 years since Henry Valentine Connolly, the former collector of Malabar, was killed by religious extremists. Even the Hindu had to admit in 2018. So once the Moplas lost their hegemony over forest lands, they entered into very bitter encounters with the Hindu landlords, which took place in areas such as, forest areas, timber zones such as Manjeri, Nilambur, Kolattur, Mattannur, Chirakkal, Irikur, Kottayam, and Eranad, associated with the Hindu aristocracies who managed the timber zones. And these riots were marshaled by wealthy Mapula families. We have to identify it, not by tenants, but wealthy Mapula families marshaled the riots against Hindu aristocracies from 1850s till 1920s.
Thank you, Dr. Harishankar, for such detailed and very academic, well-researched account of the reasons behind and the situation in the Malabar region and the factors which led to Mopla riots in 1921. As you mentioned, it wasn't, you can say, uprising against whether it was Hindu landlords or against the British rulers. There were several factors, and you mentioned about almost 50 riots happening within few decades. And all the riots happened because Muslims wanted to construct a mosque adjacent to temples, Hindu temples, and they were denied lands by Hindus, and they got agitated, they indulged in communal riots. Then you also mentioned about the vast timber trade, which was monopolized by the Moplas, the rich Moplas. And then British got into it, and then Hindus also got into it, which agitated the Muslims, and the rich Muslim traders of timber. They instigated the masses, Muslim moblahs, these tenants or laborers or peasants, uh, to indulge in riots against Hindus. And you concluded by saying that thousands, almost you mentioned the number of 20,000 Hindus were killed. 20,000 Hindus were killed, and our historians, our communist and leftist historians, they totally whitewashed it as it was nothing. It was a minor, you can say, class struggle of poor Muslim tenants revolting against the exploitation by rich Hindu landlords. And you have provided us insights.
Hello, Guldeep I have a quick point to make.
Please.
Yeah. This Malabar has a history of from something like 1850s. There is a series of anti-Hindu attacks by Muslims, and they actually romanticize it and call it as Halilakam in Malayalam. So basically, it is romanticized. Basically, it's like before Muslims get into this Halilakam, they actually take a vow and they denounce all their properties. So it's like they will go out, they will occupy some temples, they will destroy temples, they will desecrate the idols. There are many series of such incidents. Something like 50, 60 incidents are actually reported. And at the end, this 1921 Hindu massacre to a larger extent happened. Uh, so actually, even now also, even most of the people who left to join Islamic State in India are from Kerala. And there are multiple incidents of like radicalization in Kerala. Like you can see a single news at least about this radicalization. There are multiple Islamic organizations which are like recruiting people to fight in Pakistan, Afghanistan, or Iraq and Syria. So this history, it's like at least we can say that it starts from this 1850s.
See, any discussion on Malabar riots or Hindu massacre will be incomplete if we go with a single idea in mind. Today, luckily, fortunately, Dr. Kuldeep Ratnuji started with a correct narrative mentioning that it was a part of the Pan-Islam Khilafat movement. So that is the main important issue. Malabar riots or Hindu massacre had a history of number of riots. Yet, it was the Malabar variant of Khilafat agitations was most important. And then coming to the question raised by Srimati Lakshmi Parameshwaran, it was never an independent movement. It was never a part of any agrarian thing. The reason is that Khilafat movement never asked for India's independence. It was trying to make re-establishment of Khilafat as well as Khilafat in Kerala. And that was the role by Ali Mudaliar. He tried to bring in the first caliphate in Kerala. And then the most important part of it is that, very important thing, Kashmir and Kerala have similarities. In Kashmir also, communists, prior to India's independence, tried to create an artificial peasants' feudal unrest. Similarly, in Kerala also, they wanted to make it a sort of unrest of peasants against the feudal society. But in fact, it comes to the point with the laborious effort of Dr. Hari Shankar, it has been brought out that there was a sizable number of feudal Islam in Malabar. And in fact, what they did was to make, especially these timber merchants, they tried to make use of their religious crowds with the help of clergy to attack Hindus and conquer more and more lands and assets for themselves. So the right perspective has been put forward now That is, it was never a present unrest. But one thing we have to be very clear about, because the title of today's discussion was Agrarian Uprising or Uprising Revolts or Forest Banditry. We cannot ask yes or no there. We have to say, as you have correctly initiated the discussion by mentioning it as a Malabar variant of Khilafat, Pan-Khilafat movement. That is all I have to say. Thank you.
I just wanted to, Rajshekharanji has referred to Kashmir. In one stroke, Sheikh Abdullah dispossessed all Hindus of their land without a compensation. That was the type of people who will create certain movements to have a wedge between age-old relationship between Hindus and Muslims. And that is how it happened, and then was put, the religion was also put in, which created a huge wedge between the Hindus and Muslims. It's a historic moment which dispossessed the Kashmiri Hindus of their farmlands. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. So I do have a question. I had read that Gandhiji had written a letter. This was open letter to the Hindus of Malabar, the Mopla right victims. So I thought that the letter was completely bizarre and I dismissed it. But years later, I had read a similar letter, and this was quoted by some Pakistani historians, and this was one was to Churchill, and the other was to Jews and the victims of Holocaust. And the three letters, the tone and tonality was very similar. It was very striking. So I somehow I thought that that what I had completely kind of said that this is a bogus letter and this cannot be real. I just want to know if he had actually written a letter to the victims saying that you really shouldn't have run away, you should have shown some courage and taken the dagger on your chest so that your Muslim brothers would have respect for you. So I just want to know if that is an authentic letter, because I want there's not said a lot about Gandhi's reaction on the Mopla rights.
Sanjay ji, you want to say something?
This Ali Musliar is the priest of this Tirurangadi mosque. Formerly, he was working in Lakshadweep. He has religious training in West Asia also. So, his disciples centered at this Tirurangadi is the main people who led this rite. Not only that, in earlier rites, this family of Ali Musliar is also connected. So that is what he said.
Sanjay ji, there was one more question about Gandhiji's letter. Was it about Malabar victims or was it about partition victims?
No, it was on
any letter.
Yeah, it was on at least what I had read. It was on the victims of the Mopla rights.
Oh, Sanjay ji, you want to throw some light about it?
So there is a deeply rooted tradition of this Wahhabi Islam in Malabar. This has this phenomena has been developed from the time of the presence of Portuguese in North Malabar area. And not only that, as Harishankarji has tried to bring forth for this through his work, that the wealthy Muslims have instigated the ordinary Muslims in the name of religion to fulfill their economic and commercial interests. So that is what has been what was replace in that area.
That I want to add only what has been just said. Wahhabism has destroyed the culture of Kashmiri and totality. And it would be interesting to know I was a unanimous president of the Kashmir University, Students' Union. And to my surprise, there were mostly Muslims in proportion to Hindus. And they elected me. But it was late 1960s, 67, 69. But over the, I found that both center and states were responsible for creating such a system there. And there was no interest for the administrative part of it to curb it or to dissociate or to discourage them. That is what happened in 1990 when the Hindus were massacred. There was a garrison of army. They were never ever ordered to go out because it was the Muslim up there. They would never dare to come out like what they did in 1990. I don't know. We still have to find an answer why it happened in Kashmir, a massacre, looting, raping, cutting the bodies. And really, I can't put it in words what they did to us.
The Malabar Rebellion, which happened before 100 years ago, is not a closed chapter as far as the experience of Kerala is concerned. Just a few weeks before our independence day, there was the fanatic Muslims murdered a converted wealthy Mappala who has become a Hindu through Arya Samadhis. And after that, in 50s also, there was such fierce riots in Kozhikode district. Only after 60s, there was some change the scenario. You all know that after 80s, 1980s, in the background of this global jihadi terror, the emergence of jihadi terror at global level, there is some change in the social scenario of Kerala also. You may have heard about the Marad massacre. About 8 fishermen belonging to Hindu fold has been murdered in 2003 at Marad beach in Kerala. So, as I have said earlier, in Kerala, there is a deep tradition of Wahhabi Islam. It may assert itself at any moment. So that radical Islamic forces has a historical foothold in Malabar. So this issue of jihadi terror is still there. So that is the most important lesson the people of Kerala should take notice of. And not only that, as somebody has mentioned here, there are so many modules of this Islamic states in Kerala. so many youngsters, especially newly converted youngsters, both the boys and girls, went to West Asia to join this IS force. So when we discuss about 1921 popular riots, the situation, the present situation is more alarming.
Thank you, Sanjay ji. Thank you very much for concluding and also highlighting the challenge which we are still facing in 2021, 100 years after Mopla Roys. And as you mentioned, more and more youngsters are identifying with what is happening in Afghanistan or in Syria and running away from India to join Islamic State, Taliban or ISIS and all that terror organizations. So that Wahhabi jihadi mentality is still firmly rooted in Kerala, and it poses a very serious challenge to peace of people, not only in Kerala and other southern states, but all over India and even outside India, as some youngsters were caught outside India. Even there was some news reports which identified Kerala youth behind the massacre of Hindus and Sikhs in Afghanistan few months back. So all these indications are definitely a cause of worry, and we will have to meet again, and we'll have to. I would request all of you to read more and buy this book. This book by Harisankar ji, this Beyond Rampage. You may be seeing it in different. This Beyond Rampage, West Asian Context of Malabar and Khilafat. So this book will definitely provide us more insights about the timber trade and how riots took place mostly in the forested regions, and agriculture uprising or agrarian crisis or agrarian exploitation was very little to have anything with the riots and with the violence and with the killing of Hindus, Hindu women, Hindu children. It's a very painful to see complete denial of such a mass level massacre, genocide of innocents by ideologically driven prejudiced historians, and trying to whitewash the terror and the communal mindset, anti-national mindset of jihadis and Wahhabis. I conclude with these remarks